Blog Talk Radio.
Live from the nation's capital, it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry, with host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Michael Anthony Ingram. I'd like to welcome you to Quintessential Listening Poetry. Our very special guest tonight is acclaimed poet Linda Imbler. I'm so nervous because Linda is fantastic. Are you there, Linda?
I am here, Dr. Ingram. Thank you so much for inviting me. You're such a nice man. Yes, we were chuckling before. Oh, we'll be fine.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, this is an opportunity for me to ask you questions, for you to share your work, and for us to go on a journey together for the next hour and have a lot of fun. All right?
Okay, I'm ready.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Were you meant to be a poet? Based on my reading of your work,
was.
You do? Okay, tell me why.
Why? Well, it's not that I'm all that grand, but I certainly put my heart into it. If you kind of wanted to know why I write, I suppose it's my way of making sense of the world and organizing memories, and in that regard, poetry helps me do that.
All right. Well, let me ask this question: how has your idea of poetry changed since you began writing? Or has it changed? Maybe it's not.
Well, actually, my idea of poetry has evolved over the years. When I was a young girl and I first started being exposed to poetry, everything had to rhyme. I wrote about nature. I only wrote about nature and trees and birds and things, which is a very specific skill as far as I'm concerned. There's some wonderful nature poets out there. And as I grew into my preteens and teens, I started being exposed to music. I started understanding the storytelling process of poetry when the Beatles came to America.
All right.
Not necessarily because of them, but because I started paying more attention to music and to lyrics. And so I started being exposed to people like Bob Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary and Pete Seeger, people that would tell stories, even country musicians who would tell stories. So that was kind of my evolution.
That was part of your evolution. Well, as you think about your past and your growth in this regard, who are three of your favorite historical poets?
Favorites. Let's see.
Yes.
Well, I absolutely love Paul Dunbar. He's not very well known. He was he died in 1906 of tuberculosis. He was the first African American poet to earn national distinction and acceptance.
Yes, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. Yes.
Beauty and lyricism in his work, and I know that he influenced Maya Angelou also.
All right.
With his dialectical writing that he did, even though a lot of times he wrote in very standard English, very conventional English. Emily Dickinson and John Donne.
Tell me about John Donne. What about his work inspires you?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the whole purpose of poetry is to add to the beauty of the world. Even if you're writing about things that are unpleasant topics, if you write it in beautiful language, it's poetic. And John Donne did that. He wrote about some very sad things. He wrote about some mystical things. He wrote about some things that he was uncertain about, but he did it with such beauty in the language that that draws me to his work.
All right, then. Well, it's time for you to share your work. So please begin.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. I'll start with kind of an interesting poem that I wrote. Do you want to hear historically how I set it up, or you want me to tell you after I'm done?
Yes, please share that.
Okay. I have a friend who's living with bipolar disorder, and several years ago he asked me if I'd write a poem about his condition and how it affects those who have it. And so I wrote it to describe the circular symptoms that affect a person, the ups and downs. But I wrote it in a manic style, so has none of the usual writing conventions. There's no capitalization or punctuation or anything. It's called The Bouncy Ball Man's Bipolar Journey. Unlike the yo-yo with its advantage of a straight trajectory, he rises into the heavens where he dances unabashed with comets, using asteroids as castanets, while his Castilian boot heels click across the sky, his silky sable hair being blown by cosmic winds, his head thrown back as a gleeful song rises from his throat. The blessed cold and dark do not bother him. His descent takes him past us, and as he passes, he laments the fact that we don't see him, he thinks. Below in the depths, the pressure is so onerous, like Atlas or the turtle. He struggles to hold up his own world, the cursed heat of pain and sorrow subjecting him to merciless, vexing light and unbroken rage, eventually setting him alight. And as he burns, what comes from his throat sounds nothing like song. But as does the phoenix, he will rise from the ashes, again transitioning, once again a passerby in the land of man. He still laments the fact that we don't see him, he thinks, but this time he wonders. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem, The Bouncy Ball Man's Bipolar Journey.
Well, as someone who understands mental illness quite well, it was a beautiful piece. And it did reflect the ups and downs of dealing with that particular condition. So, again, thank you for sharing. Well, let me ask this question.
Thank you.
What is your process? Do you write pen and paper, computer, notebooks? How do you write?
That's a very good question. I do the majority of my writing in the dead of night. So my days are more spent. I'm terrible insomniac. My days are merely set aside for editing and submissions and rewrites. I have several stage process that I go through to from start to finish. I keep a recorder on my nightstand, and I record images and lines as I dream them or as they tickle my brain while I'm lying in bed. If I'm in daylight, I grab a notebook and proceed to write down ideas. I work until I feel that I've said what I want to say in the way that I want to say it. And then I take my work to my Mac and I dictate the poems to see if they sound right. Because as much as I care about how my poems look, I care just as much about how they sound, because my poems are meant to be read. They're also meant to be spoken, and they're meant to be heard.
Okay.
So that's my process.
Well, what is the difference then between your speaking voice and your written voice? What's the relationship between the two?
I have a rather extensive vocabulary, so those two aspects fit nicely, the extensive vocabulary and the poetic voice. I'm not always as poetic in speaking as I am when I write, because I love to laugh, I love humor, but I seldom write funny stuff. But I do like the idea of seeing connections between things. I'm open to a lot of ideas, at least to consider a lot of ideas. I don't accept everything, but I'll look at something and I'll mull it over. And that process helps me just when I think about anything, and it certainly has helped me when I write.
All right. Well, please.
Another thing, go ahead.
No, please. I'm listening with bated breath.
Oh, I was just gonna really. I was just gonna add. See, I can be funny. I can be. I just wanted to add that I'm not afraid to take a poem in a completely different direction or to emphasize one theme of I have emphasized one theme in a poem and struggled with it and then thought, what am I doing? I really don't want to write about that part of this poem. I want to write about this part of the poem. So I'll just completely shift gears. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, and you've probably done that too.
Yes. Well, please share another.
Okay. Let's see. This poem was nominated for, God bless them, they're wonderful people, Penguin Review. They nominated it for a Best of the Net for 2018.
Oh, congratulations.
And, thank you. And it's also been put on video, beautifully produced by a wonderful guitar player, Tim Sanders. The images are just gorgeous for it. But anyway, it's called Guitar. And it's since I'm a guitar player and since my husband and I build classical guitars and steel strings, I wrote this poem about my very first guitar, Maggie. From blocks and strips of wood you were created. Now, a perfect instrument, a testament to expert hands that built you. Your perfect tone, a testament to the ability of she who plays you. You inspire her, this player, to become worthy of reflecting your potential, the capability of sweet songs or rousing choruses. Nestled in your stand, you always appear so morose, as if the neglect eats at your very essence. You're meant to be touched, meant to be held as a lover, a close friend, a great companion with endless musical possibilities, to be enjoyed by player and listener alike, a relationship to last a lifetime. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem Guitar.
All right. Please share another.
Okay. I had someone ask me, would you write a poem about how weird time is? And I thought, okay, let's see. First of all, I have to figure out what's weird about time. And you know how you wait for something to happen and it's real slow or it's real fast, and I'm sure everybody listening can relate to that also. So I wrote a poem called Time is Harlequin. Some strange trick of the mind, sleight of hand, time's hands, idleness or fixed energy, cards quickly shuffled, hocus pocus, the fast card shuffler's hands, prestidigitation, pace disguised as standard routine, felt as fast or slow. Thus, we register our accomplishments done by the ticking of the clock or the turning of the world. Those routine beats of time sped up, not standard, or slowed down. Our false system of reckoning, calendars flap quickly through their phases as if by legerdemain. Wizards of time shift the measuring. The same degree of hour, second, or minute altered, grown longer or shorter by our accursed invitation to watch the Harlequin perform. We lose count of the acquisition and reward for tasks and projects completed. Only in retrospect, at the end, does deft trickery stop. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem, Time is Harlequin. Time gets away from you and you think, well, what was I doing all that time? Sometimes it drags on.
Yes, I really like the first line, some strange trick of the mind, if I got that correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. It is. It's a trick of the mind. I agree with that 100%. You've written so extensively. You've published 3 collections. You've got your fourth collection, Pairings, which is available on Amazon. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let me ask this question. What are some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into the concoction we call a poem? What should go into a poem?
Oh, let me think about that for a minute. I think a poem needs to have a point of view or a message.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to have special words that accurately portray an emotion. And I think it has to have the person's own voice. And that's all I can think of right off the bat.
Okay. Makes sense. That makes sense. Well, with that in mind, please share another.
Okay. This poem is called Obbligato, and in music, an obbligato is an integral part of a piece, and something that shouldn't be left out. And to set this one up, I've always thought swans were among some of the most beautiful birds in the world, and they do mate for life. So this poem is about love and devotion and ultimately grief. You know, the same emotions felt by couples in long relationships. And then I'll tell you the rest of it when I'm done with it. I love to sit on the lakeshore and watch the soft float of the birds. One day, I saw a bevy of swans, 15 in all. I saw a young male swan softly glide amidst the group. This beautiful cob with his long neck and wild white plumage, feathers that looked as delicate as ice shavings. He then used his honk to get her attention, that young female pen. She paired with him that day and every day thereafter. They became each other's must-have. For 20 years, I watched as she called their young back home with her sharp, shrill bark. I watched as he hissed away threats with his wheezy breath. I watched as he trumpeted to protect their family. I heard all the songs of those swan symphony within those years, save one. And then that daybreak, I watched as he awoke to the rising sun, but not the rising of his mate. I watched as he touched her feathers, now as cold as ice shavings. And I heard the obbligato, woven by grief, within his swan song, as it became his must-do. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem Obbligato.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Let's take a brief break, Linda, and we'll be right back.
Sure. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram, and this is Quintessential Listening Poetry. I'm here with the fantastic Linda Imbler, and she's sharing her work tonight. If you'd like to call in, the number is 646-787-1631. Again, that's 646-787-1631 if you have a question for Linda. I've got a question for Linda. All right.
I'm here.
All right. Some poets are also active in other creative areas. What are some of your favorite non-poetry or literature activities? And I know one, classical guitar. Anything else?
I am a budding illustrator. I don't draw very well, but I'm working at it. And actually, my second print book, Lost and Found, has some of my drawings in it. And so people can kind of tell, can kind of tell from looking at that, whether there's any promise there or not. The Guggenheim Museum hasn't been beating down my door, so probably not. But
all right. are there recurring themes in your work? What are some of the predominant themes as you think about all of your work?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. My first book focused exclusively on ideas and concepts about time and death, and there was a lot of mysticism in there.
Okay.
My second book, the one that has the illustrations in it, focused on earthly things lost and things found. And then my third book focused on opposite nature things, dissonance and consonance. So it was the Sea Secret song. So there's a lot of musical themes in there, but there's a lot of opposite sorts of things in there. I have written about war. I have written about aging, death, time. Of course, you've heard animals. Just lots of ideas. You know, I'm very interested in the what if. That's kind of one of the things that makes me write is the what if. What if this? What if that? And I've always enjoyed the challenge of taking an image or a word or a quote or a philosophical statement or something and imagining a what if in response to it. So.
Okay. You know, you've written so much and you've been published. We've already shared that piece. What advice would you give to an aspiring poet in terms of publishing?
I think one of the main things, the thing that I tell people when they think about writing is you really need to be a reader. It's really important to be a reader because there's lots of ideas out there. Reading exposes people to styles and vocabulary and the use of words, you know, which is so critical in poetry, of course. It's a very effective way. In fact, it's probably the most effective way to gain insights and ideas. And then combining those with their own life experiences, that forms the seeds of writing. And then,
right.
Yeah.
No, please continue.
Well, I was just going to add, the act of writing itself is a craft. I mean, some people call it an art, some people call it a craft, but you can only learn by doing it. I mean, I don't know that there's any, and I apologize to anybody that is an actual natural poet, but I think it does take some work. I think you just have to write. And another thing that's really important, I think some people try and skip this point, you have to find someone you trust to give you constructive criticism about your work and not just actual compliments. I think that's really, really important. Yeah, it can be difficult, but I think if you go back and, you know, if you're willing to fight for your side of the argument, so to speak, then go for it. But to be reflective about your own work, I think that's a really important. I think that's a real talent in itself to be reflective about things.
Yes, I do understand. I led a poetry group, a workshop for about 5 years here in D.C., and that was part of the process in learning how to allow people to offer you constructive criticism. That's what we talked about a lot.
Criticism doesn't mean they think your piece stinks. It just means, and I think the other thing that poets need to understand is once your work's out there, and I think Sylvia Plath or somebody said this, or no, it was Joan Didion. She said once your work's out there, the reader is doing the interpretation. You've lost control of that. However you thought you wanted it interpreted, it's out there being interpreted the way that the reader's interpreting it. So, you know, I know it's our baby and we birth these things, but we also need to raise them and let them go out and fly.
Well, speaking of that, is it finished when it's out there, or do you go back and fiddle with it again?
Normally I don't. Normally I make sure that I said what I wanted to say the way I wanted to say it. But every once in a while, I will go back and look and maybe change a word. Maybe not change the tempo or the meter or the emphasis, the not the plot, but just the theme. But I might just change a word. I might choose a different synonym. I'm pretty careful, though, about trying to make a rhythm happen, even with my free verse.
Yes. All right. Well, please share another.
Okay. This one is actually a social statement. I don't really write about politics, and I do have some ideas about how I feel about certain things. This one's called Uniforms. And it's actually, it has a particular format. And if I could just explain what that format is, there's 6 lines here, and then there's a series of about 8 spaces, and then there's the last 2 lines. So when I read this one, I'm going to have just a slight pause in there. And I'll make sure I tell you when it's over. But it's really important that it's read this way because that's part of the significance of the poem. It's called Uniforms. Put on your dress blues, stand tall and keep the law. Put on your olive green, stand tall and defend. Put on your white smocks, stand tall and heal. Put on what you dug from the trash, hide your face and feel the scorn. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem Uniforms. And I think it's pretty obvious who is digging in the trash. But homeless people have uniforms also,
Yes. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
And
well, let me ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
No, please. I'm interrupting you too much. I'm sorry. I'm just so excited that you're here. So please.
No,
please.
That's okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, what do you view as being poetry's role in modern society? And maybe you've already answered that, but I just want to hear a couple more words.
That is that is an excellent question. I think the main role of poetry, again, and I can't stress this enough for my part, is to add to the beauty of the world. I really think that's what poetry is. I know that some people out there put things in their poems that might be unpleasant topics or something, and I've written about some unpleasant topics myself. Mm-hmm. But I think if you look at it through a prism of beautiful words, if that makes any sense at all, then
yes.
That helps. I think another thing that's really important about poetry and what you're asking is I think poetry should ask more questions than it answers. I think there should be a question in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the poem should leave the reader with a question about something, not because the writer wasn't clear, just because I think life is worth thinking about and ideas are worth thinking about. And if we're going to be out there and be honest and be talking to each other about our writing and everything, we need to talk about what our feelings are and our thoughts are. So, I love a good, not necessarily debate, but a good conversation. And I think poetry can give conversation.
Well, you mentioned the word that is beauty of the world. Tell me more
mm-hmm.
about the beauty part. What is the beauty?
As far as poetry is concerned?
Yes, as far as poetry is concerned, yes. What makes it beautiful?
I think the way that someone can turn a phrase. For instance, if we go back and look at Obligato, I mean, this is about a swan who finds his mate has passed away at night, and when we're talking about his grief and everything, we're talking about it through a musical prism. So I think that kind of makes it a little prettier than what it was. there's all sorts of poetry out there that's been. You look at someone like Emily Dickinson, who wrote about death extensively with such beautiful language, and back to John Donne, who had some really, really sad ideas, but used phrases that just brought tears to your eyes. So that's really what I mean.
All right, then. Many make the following statement that to see the world with complete honesty, beauty, one should look to comedians, artists, and poets. What do you think naturally emerges from your work? What emerges from Linda Imbler's work? Who is Linda Imbler as a poet? Maybe that's a better question.
I'm thinking.
All right. Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks, to ask these tough questions.
That's right, absolutely. Would you repeat that last part of the question there?
All right. Who is Linda Imbler as a poet?
Who am I as a poet?
As a poet, yes.
Someone who is who's actually a student of words is where I'm at in the process. That's where I see myself in the process. Someone who's trying to add to the beauty of the world and who is trying to communicate ideas. I think that ideas that are important to me, but also to put them in a common form, so that people have something. Again, getting that communication going. That's being a student. That's where I'm at. I've been writing publicly since January of 2015, and I have so far to go to be really, really good at this. So I'm a student.
Well, you've been you're quite acclaimed artist. So I mean, you've been doing great work since 2015.
Well, thank you.
Well, please share another.
Okay, let's see. I wrote one recently that you might. Let me pull this little puppy out of here. When they had the Florida floods, I wrote a poem about. This is another one that is about something awful, but tell me what you think about the beauty of the words after I'm done with it. It's called Neptune's Choir. There were hundreds of people singing there, voices at the shore. Then the waves came crashing down. So many songsters drowned, while seagulls lamented overhead, articulating above the water's flow and ebb, with shrill voices, the fearful nature of grief. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem Neptune's Choir. And if I might translate this one just a little bit, there were a lot of people in Florida that did. There were people who died in Florida. They did drown. People whose voices had been heard, people who were singing their way through life, and then those voices were stilled when the water took them. We, the survivors, are the seagulls, lamenting overhead, not because we're better than they were, but because we happen to be on higher ground.
Yes.
And so we were articulating above the water's flow and ebb with shrill voices. We were crying for the deceased. And so that's kind of an idea of how you take words and you make an idea more beautiful, even though it's kind of a sad subject.
It's funny, as I have had an opportunity to read some of your work, the title, like Neptune's Choir, is quite creative. Why is it important to have great titles for your work, or good titles for your work? Why should you pay attention to the title?
Because I think the title should summarize the poem in some respect. I think it's important to summarize and give, especially since I want my work to be read by people who aren't poets, who are just maybe family members or neighbors or something, and they don't really understand poetry very well, but if they can see a title and they think, oh, okay, there's going to be something in here. They may not be looking for Neptune's name in the poem, but they're going to go back and look at the title. They'll read the title, they'll read the poem, and then they'll go back and look at the title and go, oh, yeah, okay, I can see where that would be Neptune's choir. Okay, because you're talking about people singing through life, and kind of that's the way that works.
Well, I agree. When I went back and
poems,
okay, I'm interrupting. I'm so sorry. I am so. You're the best guest.
You are so cute. I'm just having a ball here.
Right,
a lot of my poems are just one word or one or two words, and to be honest, my editor says, you've got some really good poems here. Can you just kind of, why don't you just elongate some of those, because I really like those long titles. So I'm trying to get better at that.
Well, I was going to share that in terms of Neptune's choir, I had to go back to the title again, and I understand it perfectly now. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful title. It's really touching, to be quite honest.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me that you said that. I'm very,
it really
very
is.
touched.
Well, let me ask this question. All poets have several words that come up over and over again, words or sentences. They just can't help but including in their work. What are three of your absolute favorite words?
Neptune? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I take that back.
Okay, two to go.
Three. Oh, no. I didn't hear the buzzer. Okay, three favorite words. I think based on all my work, looking at all four of my books, I think spirit is one that stands out.
All right.
The word before, that's kind of a long explanation, so just trust me on that. And
okay,
the word silence. I think those three words.
Tell us why.
I knew you were going to do that to me. Okay. Well, like I said, with spirit, there's so much with mysticism and everything in there. And, of course, the first book being about time and death, especially the death part, there's a lot of things about spirit. But we also have, when we're looking at the social justice pieces and we're looking at some of the relationship pieces, we're talking about spirit. People having not necessarily just, a heavenly spirit, but we're talking about just having the rah-rah spirit, esprit de corps and that sort of thing. I think the word before comes up because when you're laying out a poem, you're kind of starting, at least I start at the beginning and go to the end. I think some people might write the last line maybe and go backwards from there, but that doesn't work for me. I have to kind of start at the beginning and kind of work the journey through my mind and with my words and kind of see where it's laid out. I have a huge pile of phrases that I have abandoned for other poems, but I keep them in hopes that I will use them in another poem sometime, and I'm slowly whittling the pile down. But I think that's where some of those befores come from. I have gone in and I thought, oh wow, I think I'm just going to take this one line. This is going to be the beginning of a new poem, even though I totally abandoned it for the middle of something else. It became critical to being the beginning of that poem. Silence. I think if we really want to hear what people are saying, I think we ourselves need to be silent and listen. It's kind of my thinking on it.
All right. Well, let's take a brief break and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram, and this is Quintessential Listening Poetry. I'm here with Linda Imbler, and we're having a fantastic time. You know, Linda, when I write, I have a habit of writing 3 poems at a time. That's just been our process. Do you have a special ritual that you go through when you prepare to write?
Not really. I've worked on up to 5 poems at one time, and sometimes I'm just struggling with one, but I'm so sick of looking at it, I just want to get it off the table.
Get it over.
So I keep at it until I get that done, and then I might put it aside for 2 or 3 months, or I might decide I'm putting that thing out there and seeing if somebody will get it, but. Here again, it's back to, I think my only real rituals are to go through the same process of pulling out every piece of writing that I have and kind of seeing where I'm at and getting focused on that. And then the ritual of, the one ritual I won't abandon is going to the Mac and doing the dictation. Because to me, that's such an important piece of what I do, is to have that, to hear that out loud and see if it makes any sense.
Well, what I'd like you to do is recite 3 poems, if you don't mind, because I really want to hear them. 3 poems. Okay.
3 poems. Okay.
Yes. This
Let's
is
see.
a mini poetry reading. A mini poetry
yeah.
reading. All right.
A mini, this one's mini. Okay, choices in frontier towns. Amid tumbleweeds and clapboard buildings, standing upon dirt roads or sawn timber days, snake oil men extolling their potions, their curing wares depleted by end of day. Risky whiskey, the magic elixir of 19th century self-proclaimed wizards. Was it truly hope in a bottle? Or just sanctioned intoxication, the Old West version of paper or plastic. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem, Choices in Frontier Towns.
All right.
All right. Then I've got another shorty here called Last Train. The railroad tracks sound as the rattle of bones. Do we dare clip-clop over the bones of our kin? That stretch of track that only the ticketed may ride. Yellow-lanterned men at the sides, guiding, like Sharon with his lamp, leading us across the Rubicon. Or a reflection off St. Michael's sword. Excuse me. There's a station up ahead. We'll know in a minute. And that is Last Train. And this one is called Schadenfreude.
Right.
Actually, Schadenfreude. It's a German word.
Yes.
The crows refused to turn away from the carnage. The broken invent frames of machine and man thrilled them. Across the road is spilled dreams and desires, never to be realized. And the crows flap their wings with glee. And I wrote that about all the looky-loos out there. That drives me crazy when I'm driving and there's an accident and everybody's like, what's going on with it? Like, we're going to have another one here if you don't pay attention.
All right.
But
does knowing that your poems are published and out there in the world for everyone to read validate your being a poet, or are you content knowing that they're out of your system?
Both. Writing to me is such a visceral response to what goes on around me that to be able to exercise some personal demons is a good reason for me to write. It also, poetry also lets me see from other people's point of view, and that's important to keeping my sanity. It helps me from feeling transitory. It allows me to memorialize people, things, and events. So all those things help me be glad that it's out there in the world. And then the fact that people, I hope I can say this without crying, my friend Tim Sanders, that I do these collaborations with on these videos. It's such a fantastic guitar player and such an excellent producer. He sent me a little note this morning. He said, "You have made me learn to love poetry. Like, you have single-handedly made me learn to love poetry again." And I thought, wow. Okay, you hear stuff like that. And he's not an editor. He's not a poet. He's not an editor. He's a creative person. But I mean, that meant the world to me for him to say that.
Well, listening to you share and discuss poetry, I can understand why you felt that way.
Thank you. It's very kind.
I really can. You have a grasp of the concept around poetry. You have a grasp of the practical piece, and both are very, very important. Please share another with us.
Okay. This is one of the few. I don't do a lot of rhyming poems, but once in a while. But I do try my hand at different forms and everything, because I think it's really important for people to challenge themselves and not get stuck in one particular thing. This is called The Heart's Camera. That second of time caught in an eyepiece as the camera shutter loudly snapped. The capturing of blissful calm and ease on young faces of those photographed. This image will stand as a testament to the history of good friends well met. To whom, to what, and to how it was then. Photostat narrative of this quartet. Their stout hearts were worn on their sleeves that noon. Sleeves now faded with the passing of time. And so this photo keeps fading too, as each one arrives at the finish line. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem, The Heart's Camera. We've all had those beautiful moments with our friends that are forever memorialized on Kodak.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny, some people don't remember Kodak, but I do. I remember Kodak cameras. I'm
okay,
old,
Grandpa.
Okay. You had an opportunity. Again, I keep saying this, to publish so much. Have you had opportunity to do book signings?
I have signed individual books for people. No, but I have a huge event coming up. I'm going to be at the Kansas State Fair next summer in July, and I'm going to be doing a poetry reading for 150 to 200 Red Hat ladies.
Oh, wow.
And that is going to be a big event. So I think I'm going to have a sore wrist hopefully I'll have a sore wrist by the end of the day if I sell 2 books.
Well, the purpose of my question was to ask whether there are cities or countries that you would definitely want to have on your book tour.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Let's see. I would love to go to London or Paris and do a book tour. I would love to go to Chicago or Washington, D.C. I've been to Washington. Love the metro. It's a cool place.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. I'd love to have a book signing down in Key West just so I can go again and have a good time. But
yes. All right.
Check that one in there. Thank you. Good question.
All right. Well, favor us again.
Okay, this is a fairly recent one. I wrote this. It's called Tommy Boy, and it's a tribute to Tom Petty. Tommy Boy, you've been called home. That front porch light has flickered on and off, and that's your cue to stop the strum and come on home. Mama says make sure to wash your hands and hang up your wings before sitting down to supper. But first, put that guitar away. The time for playing is over as of today. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my tribute to the great Tom Petty. God rest him.
Linda, you don't know how it feels to be me.
Okay, is that, what do you mean?
That's a Tom Petty song.
Okay. All right, yeah, okay. Geez. All right. I was in a completely different universe.
That might not even be the title, but I'm sure I apologize for catching you off guard with that one.
All right, no. Hey, if I can't, if you can't make a fool out of me, I can certainly do it for both of us, so it's not a problem.
Right. We talked about historical poets that are part of your system and that inspire you. Are there current day artists that you continually go back to read their work?
Oh gosh, I have a slew of people that just current people that I listen to. I here again, I think John Donne. Walt Whitman, I'll go back and listen to. But the majority of the poets who mean the most to me are not the old masters. They're the people who are closest to my heart. That they're the songwriters of my generation and past your generation, generations to come. People like Bob Dylan, and if I can interrupt for a minute, Dr. Ingram, I cannot stress it enough. He is my heart pirate. Okay, and if anybody really knows Bob Dylan, call me. Gordon Lightfoot, Joni Mitchell, John Denver, Jim Croce, Jerry Jeff Walker, Willie Nelson, Robert Plant is another one that's an excellent songwriter. James Taylor. Willie Dixon wrote some great stuff. David Bowie, Woody Guthrie, Lou Reed, Van Morrison, Neil Young, Bob Marley, Stevie Wonder, Leonard Cohen. I mean, there's a ton of great songwriters, and those are the people that really inspired that visceral response to life, that taught me that that's okay, and I don't just have to write about trees and things. So that's really where my therapy started, was listening to them explain the world through their words and helping me learn how to do that for myself.
So poetry really is the song, and then the song is poetry.
Yes. Yeah, poetry is, basically music without the notes,
Without the notes.
I mean, to me. I mean, this is my personal opinion. Somebody else out there may feel completely differently.
All right. Well, share another piece.
Okay. Now, this one, we were talking about beautiful words and everything. Sometimes things just get downright mean and dirty. This one's called Incendiary, and anybody that's listening that's heard this one's probably going, oh, not a pleasant subject. Okay, this one's about, I had read this book about a mentally deranged lady that set her house on fire and killed 2 out of her 3 children to get back at her husband for having an affair. I know, it's a true story, but it was creepy. But what if a mother decided to burn her house down to protect them rather than commit murder? So this is called Incendiary. And this is another one that Tim and I put together in a collaboration. He did the guitar music, and he did these beautiful photographs. I mean, you don't think of there being beauty in this. There was. Barbie dolls and G.I. Joes, Matchbox cars, colorful Legos, all lost to the house going up in flames. Please don't light the match. She will always take the blame, protect the children's lives. Today's surprise, an empty box, no ribbon tied. I know what's mine. Please don't light the match. The fault lies outside these walls, his gaslighting to best effect, decisions in his hands. He criticizes, puts her down, alibis run dry, There's too much to do, so she can't see you. Must not answer the phone. Please don't light the match. Stay in this house alone. Keep the peace for them. Too late. She's found that nerve that twangs after he last harangues. Being ignored would have been so great. Please don't light the match. Too late. Better this way. Hold the kids and watch it catch. And that, Dr. Ingram, is incendiary. It's Tim's fault. He told me to send him a controversial poem because he said guitar was too sweet. So I sent him that one.
Linda, poets are from all over the world. Where do you hail from?
Yes. I was born and raised in Texas. I lived in St. Louis for 4.5 years, but I am a Texan until I met my future husband at University of Texas at Austin. And we got married and we moved up to Kansas so he could work up here, and I started working up here, and I've been here since 1978. So.
Oh, wow. Well, how has living in Kansas influenced your work?
Well, it's made me a little cranky in the winter because I don't like snow and ice. Really, I don't know that it has significantly. There's not that much difference in cultures between Wichita and Dallas, which is where I really consider that I went to high school, and where I really consider that I hail from. People are kind of alike all over, and I have found that out with just the poets that I've talked to on Facebook and people that I've worked with or worked for and met. Everybody kind of has their demons. People have their problems. People have things they're proud of, and everybody pretty much wants the same thing. Just try and live the best life you can live, and that's about it.
All right, then. Your book, Pairings, is a collection of short fiction, pieces which are loosely coupled with your poems. What are you drawn to most, short fiction, short stories, or poetry?
Oh, poetry, definitely. Definitely poetry. But, again, some of those what-ifs that I was talking about, Dr. Ingram, those were better served with a short fiction than with a poem.
Right. Well,
so
please
that's
share
why
another.
I went that direction.
Please share another.
Okay. Soul Reader. He paid with paper money to get a quick salvage, to retrieve what he had let go, to recover what he had lost. He placed all his bets upon that spread, but one bent card wrecks the deck and stacks the pile a kilter. His future thrown off course through a single paper's weakness. And that, Dr. Ingram, is my poem, Soul Reader. You know how that one thing in life can derail you.
Yes. Do I know? One thing in life. Well, let me ask this one last question because we've come to the end of our hour.
Okay.
Usually, people in the audience, people listening would like to know what's next. They usually want more. What's next for you as a poet?
Well, I'm working on a chapbook, a small chapbook called Water, Air, Fire, Earth. It combines the 4 elements, and I've written poems with each one of those elements. I mean, I didn't do it intentionally; it just accidentally came out that way. That I happen to have certain poems that had water themes, and like Neptune's choir, or Incendiary for fire. I mean, you can kind of see here where I'm going with this. Then late in 2019, I have a book called I've already got a title for it, Inside Speaker's Frequency. And it's poems about the here and the there. So the here being earthly sorts of things, and the there being some of the more mystical things. So that's kind of where I'm going. I like to theme my books that way. And, of course, I've got that big poetry reading coming up. Well, I'm also working on a PowerPoint for lessons on writing poetry. I'll be teaching a group of fourth graders in the area.
I'm not surprised. Again, I knew there was something special about you. I knew that you were a teacher. I knew that you were a teacher.
Yes,
and you're a great one.
Once
You're
teacher,
a great
always
one.
a teacher. You can't get the teacher out of there. Well, to
That's
anybody
true.
that was listening, I love you, and I thank you so much for listening to the broadcast. That means that's wonderful. I hope there's people out there.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, too, for being our guest, and I'd like you to come back in 2019 to share more of your work.
I will do that. Dr. Ingram, thank you so much. You made this so easy.
All right, then. Well, have a great week, a great month, and happy holidays to you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for listening.